Okay, we're recording. So this week, let me go back over that. Week, everything is due on Monday. I went ahead and pushed that out because you have the 4 modules instead of the 3, and I'd already done the test pushed out week 8. This will look different. No, I don't have it listed out there, but it's all finals prep. You know how we do it. These are literally the test questions. No, you will not get every single question. I'm going to dump them in there and make it randomly choose out of this test bank. So go look at these 1 and 2. These are the practice test questions, and I will be using those for the final. So those
So
are
what you're saying is if we only study one of them, we've got a 50-50 chance of knowing all the test questions. Got it.
possibly, but remember, it's a randomizer, so you might only end up with 25 of the percent of the questions. So keep that in mind. But they're really not too bad. There's a ton of them, but I'm not going to do. I don't like. The CEH itself is a very long exam, and no, I'm not going to simulate that for your final. If I remember correctly, it's like 125 questions when you sit for it. And I'm not going to do that to you guys. I just think that's a good way to make people cry for their final. And you guys have your voucher, and I suggest you use it for CEH, but this is not the CEH. This is a written final on the CEH materials. That's it. Now, just in case you don't remember, in the resources section of Discord, don't forget that there is also some CEH free testing stuff that I picked up in bundles that I threw out there for you guys. So keep that in mind for that as well. And there's some really good stuff out there. Okay. Now, before I hit the slides, does anyone have any questions about anything else? That one is kind of up to you. I think it's best to wait while not to wait, to get it while it's fresh in your mind. But what I usually do is I do this, and then I do what's called a cram class right before I do sitting for an exam. So you have this class, and then what I would do is find one of the cram classes that helps you as well. Because I was not, and this was in my master's class. It's just a huge cert exam. Go out and look for some of those. There's a ton of them out there. And there's a bunch of, if you go look out on the resources, there's some stuff out there. I suggest that you do that in conjunction and before you sit for the exam. That's my personal advice to save yourself some heartache of having a very nice exam voucher and not feeling confident and going out and using it and then having to retake it again. So that's what I would do. Any questions before I get on to today's section? Any more questions? Nope. Everyone seems to be okay. All right. So I picked when I looked out at the in fact, I'm not sure. I put this out there for you guys, but I'm not sure if you went over it. Hold on 1 second and I'll open it up. My 30 million different. There it is. It's called the Exam Blueprint. This is by EC Council. You see how they break everything up, and it tells you the weighted sections. That's about the chance. That's how much the number of questions and the weighting for each section. So I went out and looked at which one had the highest weighting of the 3 that we hadn't covered. And as you can see, IoT has a higher weighting than cloud computing and cryptography. So we're going to go ahead and cover IoT today. I would suggest, since those slides, if you go out to course documents, you see the course slides. And we have them out here in the modules. I would suggest that you take a look at the 19 and 20 for your own edification. But that is just for your edification. But yeah, that blueprint, that's also out there in that Discord channel for you guys too, just so you know. All right, so and IoT and OT is actually one of my favorite things in security besides social engineering. So in this section, we're going to talk about IoT concepts, attacks, hacking methodology, countermeasures. Then we're going to talk about OT concepts, OT attacks, hacking methodology, and countermeasures. They just mirror each other. So 30 million slides here. So I think we should know what IoT is because I have talked about this frequently. So IoT is Internet of Things. Sometimes you see IoE, which is Internet of Everything. Basically, it just refers to network of devices having IP addresses and the capability to sense, collect, and send data using embedded sensors, communication hardware, and processors. In IoT, the term thing is used to refer to the device that is implanted on natural, human-made, or machine-made objects and has functionality of communicating over the network. So, one of the most basic things is just basic, at its most basic element, it's a thing that's connected to a network. So how IoT works, this is an example of some IoT devices, and they're sending and receiving. You can go out to data storage, internet, and remote control using apps. So this is just a super basic example. So when you're dealing with IoT architecture, we have the application layer, the middleware layer, internet layer, access gateway layer, and what's called the edge technology layer. So the application layer is the delivery of various applications to different users in IoT. Middleware is the device management and information management. Internet is your connection between endpoints. Access gateway layer, this is where your protocol translation and messaging occurs. And edge technology, this is the sensor, device, machines, and intelligent edge nodes of various types. And if you need me to stop for anything, if you have a question, yes, I know we're all kind of feeling silly because it's Friday, so I expect lots of sarcastic comments. So this has got a huge section in here, several different ones that have different tables that you can go through. So I'll run through these for you, but these are good ones for you guys if you want to keep them. IoT application areas and devices. There's buildings, energy, consumer, and home is a huge area. Healthcare and life science has become bigger and bigger. Ow, 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 cat. Detach the claw. Transportation. As you can see, there's more. Industrial, retail, security, public safety, IT, and networks. IoT technologies and protocols. There's what's called short range wireless communication. So that's our Bluetooth, low energy, light fidelity, NFC, the where you tap things to it, the near field communication, QR codes, RFID, things like that. Medium range, hollow LTE advanced, wired communication, that's when you have it just straight up plugged in. Long range wireless communication. So those are like cellular, MOT, LP-WAN. Then there's IoT operating systems. Now there are so many of these. These are just some lists of different ones. There's Windows 10 IoT, there's the Amazon ones, Riot, Ubuntu, ARM, Zephyr, and there's going to be a ton on here that aren't even listed because they're those cheap to make things that some guy in his garage decided he was gonna, are you talking about the LP WAN, the low powered Wi-Fi? Is that what your question was? Oh, okay. Sorry, I just saw something about Wi-Fi. I didn't realize you were making a joke at first. I'm a little slow today, sorry. IoT application protocols. We have CoAP, Edge, Physical Web, and a bunch of other different ones there. Now we have some communication models that are used. We have the device-to-device model. This is your where you have your light bulb, then you go over your network, and then you go, this one has your switch. Device-to-cloud model. So you have, like this one's using your temperature sensor, goes up to your application provider in the cloud, and then goes down to, can't let go of that, to your device with carbon monoxide sensor. Then you have what's called a device to gateway model. This one's got your temperature sensor, then it goes up to your application service provider, and you can see there's a local gateway that's in here for communication as well. And then there's the device out here on the side. And then there's what's called back-end data sharing. So light sensor, app service provider, and then you can see where it goes out for the back-end cloud services. Yeah, no, there are some, there's some really cool things about IoT stuff, but you really have to research before you do things. So, challenges of IoT. The number one is, of course, lack of security and privacy, vulnerable web app interfaces, legal, regulatory, and rights issues, default weak hard-coded credentials, clear text protocols, unnecessary open ports, coding errors, storage issues. Because they're small, there's not going to be much storage, right? Not on all of them. I mean, some of them do have options for expandable storage, but of course, they're the more expensive options. Difficult to update, or on here, I want to put a caveat, impossible to update firmware, because some of them are made to just basically be used and thrown away. Interoperability standard issues, physical theft and tampering, lack of vendor support or fixing vulnerabilities, because again, they make them cheap. And if they decide that they would rather just put out a new model and force people to pay for a new model, they're not going to fix anything. And then emerging economy and development issues. All right, threat versus opportunity. So these are just some, this is the difference on those for IoT. So if it's misconfigured and misapprehended, the IoT possess an unprecedented risk to personal data privacy and safety. If it's apprehended and protected, they can boost transmission, communications, delivery of service, and standard of living. So they can be really useful and great, but they come with a lot of caveats. Okay, IoT security problems. Application. Validation of the input string, auth, OSI, no automatic security updates, and of course, default passwords. Network, there's some problems there. Firewall, improper communication encryption, lack of automatic updates, lack of services. Mobile, insecure API, lack of communication channels encryption, authentication, lack of storage security. Cloud, improper authentication, no encryption for storage and communications, insecure web interfaces. So on this, when it's talking about IoT, it's just basically all those things equals, added together equal IoT. All right, I'm going to do cough, cough, because there's a question in the quiz that we're literally answering right here. OWASP top 10 IoT threats. Number one, weak, guessable, or hard-coded passwords. When I first heard that they hard-coded passwords, I was horrified. Insecure network services, insecure ecosystem interfaces, lack of secure update mechanisms, use of
Quick
insecure.
question.
Oh, yep.
Hard-coded passwords, you don't actually mean like it's impossible to change the password, do
Yes,
you?
I do. That's exactly what I mean.
Jesus.
That's why I
Hmm.
said when I first heard it, because I had to look that up and was like, surely that can't mean that you have a password on this device that you can never change. No, that is exactly what it means. It is literally hard coded and can never be changed. It's incredibly dumb.
Like
A lot of
they
places
weren't a
are,
moron. They just don't know anything about IT, and they thought, well, if I never have to change my passwords and someone else fixes the security for me, it's a great thing. So let's implement this.
yeah. Usually I would say 95% of the time it was because we don't want to spend money on people being able to change it. That's usually what I've seen on that. Then we're down to number 4, lack of secure update mechanisms, use of insecure or outdated components, insufficient privacy protection. Is that really a surprise given the first 5? Insecure data transfer and storage, lack of device management, insecure default settings. Well, gee, if you have a hard-coded password, how could that be? Insecure, I'm sorry, lack of physical hardening. So yeah, it's these are the top 10 worst case possibilities and the things that are out there right now. Okay. And one of the reasons why a lot of places don't let IoT people bring in IoT devices is this top 10s list. Because if you have a problem and someone brings in an IoT device with something like this on there, they can hit that IoT device and then pivot right through the rest of your security and get into your network. OWASP IoT attack surface areas. So the ecosystem, just in general, this is like your data governance, interoperability standards, all sorts of places. Then device memory, which has like sensitive data. It can have, anytime you see clear text and it's talking about sensitive data, it's kind of horrifying. Physical interfaces. So this one's usually firmware and things like that. And you see problems with privilege escalation. 4, device web interface. These are where you go in to log in through the web portals, and usually they have all sorts of issues with that. Device firmware, data exposure, backdoors, hard-coded credentials. That's where a lot of that comes in. And then device network services. This is where you have like your information disclosure, injection and denial of service attacks, things like that. Notice how it just keeps going. Administrative interfaces. So this is your web app vulnerabilities and injection attacks. Local data storage, unencrypted data, data encrypted with discovered keys, things like that. Cloud web interface, web application vulnerabilities, credential management vulnerabilities, and usually there's a lot of authentication and encryption issues there. 10 is third-party backend APIs. So there's usually a lot of unencrypted PII or encrypted, but it's not encrypted correctly. Update mechanisms. Updates. What updates can be a problem here? Updates sent without encryption or non-signed updates. So, you know, it's possible to get in there and send updates that aren't actually updates. Mobile applications, they are implicitly trusted by your device and the cloud, which can cause all sorts of issues if you have that in there. Account lockouts, username enumeration, and more. vendor backend APIs. So this is your more of your inherent trust issues. Ecosystem communication, that's your like heartbeats and health checks, and pushing updates. Network traffic, that can cause all sorts of problems if depending on what type of traffic is being pushed back and forth. Authentication and authorization, because frequently they're not using up-to-date anything. Privacy, which given the rest of the stuff, this should not be a surprise. And then hardware, there's all sorts of problems with physical tampering to the devices. All right. So you guys are just going to be like, is there ever an end to the vulnerabilities? The answer is no. There's always more. So this is just a list of more of these vulnerabilities and descriptions. These are threats that can be used. It depends on what you're doing. What I like IoT can be really good. And for us as security people, the more educated we are about IoT, frequently I have been asked by people about purchasing these devices. It's when we're not asked that the problems arise. So educating yourself and being able to tell people, well, this might be good, but you're going to run into problems here, here, and here, but we could fix it by doing this. You know, that's really what they want to see. So here's our nice vulnerabilities table that we had just kind of gone over some of these, and this is just a little more in depth. IoT threats. IoT devices on the internet have very few security protection mechanisms against various emerging threats. Attackers often exploit poorly protected devices on the internet and cause physical damage to the network to wiretap communications and launch disruptive attacks. IoT devices are frequently used as bots and DDoS networks. So as you can see, what's number one? DDoS attacks. And then we have a whole bunch of different other types of attacks that are very similar to ones that we've talked about before. Now, when you're dealing with IoT systems, you have the crossover for things like HVAC systems and things like that. So you do have things like attacking HVAC systems, or sometimes you have certain sensors, and they're actually going to be attacking those as well. So this one is showing an eavesdropping one, and they're using a fake server in place. DDoS attacks, we've gone over these, but when it's specific to IoT, they go in and initiate the attack, exploiting the vulnerabilities in the devices and installing malicious software in their operating systems. Multiple infected IoT devices, they're referred to your little army of botnets, and you can just create a massive botnet out of these IoT devices. In fact, the biggest IoT biggest botnet had a majority of it made out of IoT devices. Well, it depends on how much. Usually when it comes to HVAC systems, a lot of places don't do 100% everything virtual type things, because they want to have the ability to manually shut things off just in case, because they've had stuff like this happen. So usually they have a back door that the HVAC technicians can go in and shut off certain things if they have a problem. And here's our HVAC section we were talking about. But yeah, I do know that a majority of places do use internet connected heating and HVAC systems. And a lot of times when they do this, they don't talk to, this is the biggest problem that I think personally happens. They don't talk to the IT department. And the people that install the HVAC are not IT specialists, they're HVAC specialists. So they don't have the same understanding that an IT person would. And that's why I think it's important for them to work together. This is a rolling code attack. Smart vehicles. Oh, if you ever want to see something really interesting, go out and Google. I think it was a Jeep Cherokee that they did it on. They did a hack of a Jeep Cherokee, and they have video of them doing it while it's in motion and stuff. It's kind of frightening, but it's really interesting from a tech perspective. They were able to send RF signals and stuff, and I believe they were able to shut it off and basically force him off the side of the road. Blueborn, I believe, is a Bluetooth. Yeah, this one's Bluetooth connected. The reason I'm going through these kind of quickly is because we have a lot of slides in this one, and there's a lot of crossover with the ones we've gone through already. Jamming attack. This is our radio signals and stuff that we talked about previously. Hacking smart grid and industrial devices. This is a little bit different. Remote access using backdoors. So on this one, the attacker gathers basic information about the organization using social engineering. And then they send things like phishing emails with malicious attachments. And when they open those and click on it, they have backdoors installed on the target systems. Then they get in with the backdoor and gain access to the private network. And as you can see here on this one here, we have the attacker sending the code. Worker opens it, downloads the file. Attacker has access to the local network, and then they can enter the SCADA, and now anytime you hear SCADA, it's usually an industrial network interface. And this one, it disables their UPS and then disables the power supplies leaving the city in the dark. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with some of these industrial devices. I actually find the SCADA and industrial devices, some of the things that you can do with those, a lot scarier because people don't physically secure them as well as you would think they would. And by that, I'm talking about things like our power grid. SDR, so this one's software-defined radio, and they examine communication signals to the IoT network and send spam content or text to the interconnected device. And the software-based radio system can also change transmission and reception of signals between the devices based on software implementation. So then this has your replay, cryptanalysis, and reconnaissance attacks for that. And this way, this is them looking out for those local IoT devices to see what they can find. And then because they want to get into those, and then they can pivot and get out to the rest of the network. Fault injection attacks, they're also called perturbation attacks, occur when they inject any faulty or malicious program into the system to compromise system security. They can be both invasive and non-invasive. So you have a couple of different ones here. This one is the EMFI and BBI. The attacker inject faults into the device by using projecting lasers and electromagnetic pulses. And on this one is power clock reset glitch. Attackers inject faults or glitches into the power supply and clock network of the chip. Frequency and voltage tampering. They can tamper with the operating conditions, modify the level of power supply, and or alter the clock frequency of the chip. Now, a lot of this stuff you wouldn't be able to do on, like your normal motherboards, because you wouldn't even be able to reach down into this level. And then temperature attack, they alter the temperature for operating the chip, affecting the whole operating environment. And here's a nice little pile of other, and of course you got ransomware attacks, other attacks down here. Then we have attacks based on different types of service sectors. We have buildings, and then you can see the different different options you have here. You have energy and industrial, consumer and home, healthcare and life science. Notice how there's a nice huge ton of those. Transportation, automobiles, security and public safety, IT and network, critical water and infrastructure, agriculture, and marine. Now, this one's a case study that is actually, yeah, this is the one I think I was actually talking about. Mirai botnet. This is 2022. Proliferating, exploiting IoT and other routing devices. Once weakly configured device is identified and affected, the enemy bot adds that infected IoT device to its botnet fleet, and the enemy bot uses sophisticated string obfuscation methods to bypass security solutions and maintains persistent connection with the C2 server located in a Tor network. And this one, it basically, it goes through all the different steps on how this was done. And so if you want to read more on how that was done, the Mirai botnet, base botnet was actually really prolific. All right, hacking methodology. So the objective of IoT device hacking is to compromise smart devices like your CCTV cameras and everything else to gain unauthorized access to network resources and IoT devices. So how a hacker gains profit from IoT when it is successfully compromised. They create a botnet of the compromised IoT devices. They'll sell compromised data, perform malicious activity, install ransomware, use compromised IoT devices to steal identity of the victims, and use compromised CCTV cameras to snoop on people. There we go. Here is the IoT hacking methodology. It's very similar, as you noticed, to the other ones. We have our information gathering. Then we have vulnerability scanning, launching attacks, gain remote access, and maintain access. So when they are doing the information gathering, they're looking for things like IP addresses, open ports, protocols. Sometimes they even look for geolocation because that's another thing that they frequently do not lock down on IoT devices. Then they have vulnerability scanning, which helps them look for weak configurations or hidden exploits, firmware bugs, things like that. Then when they launch the attack, after they find the vulnerabilities, they have things like DOS attacks and the other ones we talked about that they can launch. Then once they've done that, they can gain remote access. Based on the vulnerabilities in the device, they can turn the device into a backdoor to gain access to the organization's network or, your personal network. And then they have to remain undetected just to see how long they can stay there and get information. All right, IoT hacking tools. So these are two different information gathering tools. There's Census and Thingful. Thingful is really cool. It's a search engine for Internet of Things to find and use open IoT data from around the world. I haven't used Census, but it allows the attacker to continuously monitor every reachable server and device on the internet. There's some sniffing tools. You'll see TCP dump and open sniffers on there. Our ever favorite Metasploit is over here on the vulnerability scanning, but we also have some other ones, IoT Sploit, IoT Seeker, and there's one by Bitdefender Home Scanner. And this one is a tools for SDR based attacks. This one's Universal Radio Hacker, used to investigate unknown wireless protocols, which are used by various IoT devices. And then they have a bunch of other ones down here. And here's some IoT hacking tools like IoT VAS, which enables device vendors and security professionals to perform automated security assessment on software that powers IoT devices to see identity configuration application vulnerabilities. And there's a nice list over there on the side for those as well. All right, so what do we do against that stuff? Okay, so disable the guest and demo user accounts if they're enabled. Use the lockout feature to lock out accounts for excessive invalid lockout attempts. Implement strong authentication mechanisms. Locate control system networks and devices behind firewalls and isolate them from the business network. That way, if they get in, they can't pivot to anything useful. Implement IPS and IDS in the network. Implement end-to-end encryption and use public key infrastructure. Use VPN architecture for secure communication. Deploy security as unified integrated system. Allow only trusted IP addresses to access the device from the internet. Disable Telnet. I can't believe we have to keep repeating that. Disable UPnP port on routers. Protect the devices against physical tampering. Patch vulnerabilities and update device firmware regularly. Monitor traffic on port 48101 as infected devices attempt to spread malicious files using that port. One thing I'm going to add here is if you can't do any of these things because they've been locked out or hardwired, get rid of the device. So, general guidelines for IoT device manufacturers. Manufacturers of IoT devices should ensure they implement the following basic security measures. SSL or TLS should be used for communications. There should be a mutual check on SSL certificates and the certificate revocation list. Use of strong passwords should be encouraged. Devices update process should be simple and secure with a chain of trust. Implementing account lockout mechanisms after a certain number of wrong login attempts to prevent brute force attacks. Lock the devices down whenever and wherever possible to prevent them from attacks. Periodically check the device for unused tools and using whitelisting to allow only trusted tools or applications to run. And use secure boot chain to verify all software that is executed on the device. So we went through these previously, and here are the solutions for those top 10 issues. Like, for example, avoid using hard-coded passwords. Who would have thought about that one, right? So these are really good ones to keep in mind if you're going to be doing a lot of IoT with your companies. IoT framework security considerations. So there's Edge, which communicates encryption, storage encryption, update components, and no default passwords. There's Gateway, which is multi-directional encrypted communications, strong authentication of all components, and automatic updates. Cloud platform, encrypted communications, secure web interface, and authentication, encrypted storage, automatic updates. Mobile, local storage security, encrypted communication channels, multi-factor authentication, and account lockout mechanisms. Now, this was not in place when IoT devices first started coming out, which is why we've had so many problems with them. IoT hardware security best practices: limit the entry points, employ a hardware tamper protection mechanism, monitor secure booting, implement security patches, maintain a proper interface management system, avoid open access to the hardware unit, secure authentication keys, maintain a proper event logging mechanism, maintain a proper anti-malware protection system, protect device access credentials, isolate devices from regular supply units, and implement a root on trust mechanism. So, IoT device management. This helps in supporting IoT solutions by using any software tools and processes, and helps in onboarding latest devices securely and promptly. It allows the users to track, monitor, and manage physical IoT devices, and forces users to remotely update the firmware. IoT device management helps in providing permissions and security capabilities for protection against vulnerabilities. So this is kind of like, do you remember how we talked about the MDM, the mobile device management? This is just IoT device management, and they did not even have this when a lot of this stuff came out. So people just would walk in and plug stuff in, and of course they just added a nice little vulnerability. So now they have some nice things like this that allow you to keep track of that. Here's some IoT security tools. CCAT.io is a security-first SaaS technology to operate IoT products in reliable, scalable, and secure manner. And DigiCert IoT Device Manager uses modern PKI to deliver digital trust that meets the needs of even the most demanding IoT deployments. And here's a nice gigantic pile. So if you're working with someone and they say there aren't any tools that we can use, that is wrong. Look how many of them there are. All right, next, we're going to talk about OT. So what is OT? OT is operational technology. And this is software or hardware designed to detect or cause changes in industrial operations. That's your key right there, industrial operations, okay? Through direct monitoring and or controlling of industrial physical devices. It consists of industrial control systems, or ICS, that include supervisory control and data acquisition. Remember me talking about SCADA? Remote terminal units, programmable logic controllers, distribution control systems, etc., to monitor and control industrial operations. No, it used to all be under one thing, but then they quickly realized, because it's its own, basically its own universe, because all it deals with is industrial operations, they split it out into its own section. So I actually like how they have this little OT, ICS, DCS, RTU. That's actually a nice little example chart there. Okay, so essential terminology, and I'm sure most of you have seen this. Assets, they're talking about physical assets like sensors, actuators, servers, workstations, things like that. Zones and conduits, network segregation techniques used to isolate the networks and assets to impose and maintain strong access control mechanisms, which you really have to do with industrial control systems, because industrial control systems are things like water and power, phone systems, you know, when you're dealing with giant factories, and you can't have everything running in the same section, because, you know, what happens if someone breaches one section and takes out an entire plant? So you have to run things in zones and conduits. Industrial network is a network of automated control systems. That's what's called an industrial network. Business network is comprised of a network of systems that offer information infrastructures to the business. Industrial protocols are protocols used for serial communication and communication over standard Ethernet. And yes, they still use serial communication in some of these, which is old, but you know, when you think about how old some of the water and power stuff is, It's not surprising. Network perimeter. This is the outermost boundary of the network zone or a closed group of assets. Electronic security perimeter. This is referred to as the boundary between secure and insecure zones. And critical infrastructure is a collection of physical or logical systems and assets that the failure or destruction of which will severely impact security, safety, economy, or public health. So IoT or IT-OT convergence. This is the integration of IT computing systems and OT operations monitoring systems to bridge the gaps between the two technologies for overall security, efficiency, and productivity. This convergence can enable smart manufacturing, known as Industry 4.0, where IoT applications are used in industrial operations. Using this IoT for industrial operations, such as monitoring, supply chain, manufacturing, and management system is referred to as industrial Internet of Things. And then you have your little OT-IT, and it's crossover here. This is the Purdue model. This is derived from Purdue Enterprise Reference Architecture model, which is widely used to describe internal connections and dependencies of important components in ICS networks. It consists of 3 zones: your manufacturing, your enterprise, and your demilitarized zones. The 3 zones are further divided into different operations levels, and you can see how they've got everything nice and color-coded out here. So what are some challenges of OT? Lack of visibility, sadly, plain text passwords, network complexity, legacy technology. Because you are dealing with ever-evolving systems, there are some old systems out there that they are still trying to bring up into the 21st century, so you're going to run into those. Lack of antivirus perfection, lack of skilled security professionals, rapid pace of change, outdated system, haphazard modernization. If you've ever been inside a large plant for any sort of production, you're going to see that. Insecure connections, usage of rogue devices, convergence with IT, organizational challenges, unique production networks and proprietary software, vulnerable communications protocols, and remote management protocols. So ICS is often referred to as a collection of different types of control systems and their associated equipment, such as systems, devices, networks, and controls, used to operate and automate several industrial processes. An ICS consists of several types of control systems like SCADA, DCS, BPS, SAS. There are all sorts of different ones. The operations of the ICS system can be configured in 3 modes, namely open loop, closed loop, and manual loop. ICS systems are extensively used in industries like electricity production and distribution, water supply and wastewater treatment, oil and natural gas supply, chemical and pharmaceutical production, pulp and paper, and food and beverages. So this is a distributed control system. It is a highly engineered and large-scale control system that's often used to perform industry-specific tasks. And these have often very specific, specialized programs. Sometimes they'll have sensors that you will only see specific to that particular industry or device. You can see stuff in certain factories that you'll never see anywhere else. It's really interesting, but it can be also very infuriating when you're trying to secure them. Contains a centralized supervisory control unit used to control multiple local controllers, thousands of I/O points, and various other field devices that are part of the overall production process. Operates using a centralized supervisory control loop that connects a group of localized controllers to execute overall the tasks required for the working of the entire production process. So if you look here, you can see how they've got everything. You've got your main server, supervisory control server, and then your redundancy server, and they're what run all the different sections. So SCADA is a centralized supervisory control system that's used for controlling and monitoring industrial facilities and infrastructure. Provides centralized controlling and monitoring of multiple process inputs and outputs by integrating data acquisition system with data transmission system and human, that's where you hear the HMI, human machine interface software. And that just basically means that something that you use to talk to it. And you can see there's some examples of SCADA architecture down here as well. So this is ICS. This is ICS with PLC, or a programmable logic controller, which is a small solid state control computer where instructions can be customized to perform specific tasks. They consist of 3 modules. You have your CPU module, power supply module, and your IO module. And you can see your example here. They're used in industries like steel industry, automobile, energy, chemical, and things like that. This is BPCS. This is responsible for process control and monitoring of industrial infrastructure. It's in systems that respond to input signals from the process and associated equipment that generate output signals that cause the process and its associated equipment to operate based on an approved design control strategy. And you can see this is the closed loop system that we're talking about. This is an example. And basically the closed loop system just means that you have everything set up and it runs through this BPCS. And then this is SIS, or Safety Instrument System, as an automated control system designed to safeguard manufacturing environment in case of hazardous incidents in the industry. It's essentially a component of a risk management strategy that uses layers of protection to prevent operational boundaries of critical processes from reaching an unsafe operating condition. So this SIS system basically comprised of sensors, logic solvers, and final control elements that maintain safe operation of processes by performing sensor collection, collect information, logic solvers, which act as controllers, and then they have a final control element that implement the actions that's determined by the logic controllers. Typical examples of these are like fire and gas systems, safety interlock systems, safety shutdown systems, things like that. OT technologies and protocols. This is one that if you're not sure about, this is a nice slide for you to have. So I'm going to tell you something that will make you probably twitch. One of the biggest problems with OT vulnerabilities is a lot of times they are not as secure to the public as they should be. A lot of times they will not have a lot of physical security options, or they'll have way stations or things like that. So it's easy to get around them because they have publicly accessible OT systems. So there's also insecure remote connections, missing security updates, weak passwords, insecure firewall configurations, OT systems placed within the corporate network, which is a really bad idea, insufficient security for corporate IT networks from OT systems, lack of segmentation, lack of encryption and authentication, and unrestricted outbound internet access. So the types of attacks you can run into are your MITRE attacks. And then you have Nice ton of different options here for OT threats. Notice number one is maintenance and administration, data leakage, protocol abuse, potential destruction of resources, reconnaissance attacks, and yes, our denial of service attacks are listed on there as well. So HMI-based attacks, attackers often attempt to compromise HMI. Those are those human interface systems at the core hub that control critical infrastructure. They gain access to the HMI system to cause physical damage to the SCADA devices or collect sensitive information. And here are some examples of vulnerabilities that can be exploited. Let's see, which one are we on? We still have 40 slides. Okay, so I am just going to, since a lot of these are very similar to what we talked about previously, there are side channel attacks you can do on these. You can hack the PLC, the programmable ones. You can hack the industrial ones through RF remote control. Here's another example of getting in through there. Malware. There's some malware analysis stuff here. Yeah, I know some of the names are great, aren't there? Indestroyer and Pipe Dream. So basically the whole point of OT hacking is damage and disruption. That's the big thing there. They want to shut down or block production or damage the system or take control of the system. So OT is the same: information gathering, vulnerability, launch, gain, remote access, maintain access. You can use Shodan. Doesn't that make you feel safe? You can use Shodan on these systems. You can look out for default passwords, because a lot of these OT systems are not usually done by information technology people. They're done by people in the water and power sectors or things like that. So they don't understand a lot of the problems, and sometimes they don't think about this stuff. You can use Nmap. You can use Nessus. You can use Skybox for vulnerability. You can fuzz the protocols. You can sniff out the network. Look at that, we got Wireshark. This one you can use to discover the network typology. You can go after the hardware itself. This is a mod specifically in Metasploit. This is all Modbus. They're walking you through. This one is gaining remote access with DNP. Here's some nice information gathering tools. I like the name of that one, SCADA Pass. That's kind of blunt. Sniffing and vulnerability scanning tools. Nice little pile of OT hacking tools. So as you can see, they've really been around for a while, and people have been working at a nice pile of ways to get around them. So how do you defend? Use purpose-built sensors to discover vulnerabilities in your network. And like usual, update your systems and patch the systems. Implement secure configuration and secure coding practices. Maintain an asset register for tracking and scrutinizing outdated systems. Use strong passwords and change default factory set passwords. Secure remote access through multi-layers of defense by implementing VPN. Secure network perimeter and filter and prevent unauthorized inbound traffic. Also outbound traffic, because if you don't filter your outbound traffic as well on some of these, you might have someone that is working there that is passing things out they're not supposed to. regular scans of the system and network using anti-malware, harden the system by disabling unused services, regularly patch, employ IDS and flow measurement systems to detect the attacks in an early stage, use only tested and familiar third-party web servers for serving ICS web applications. Ensure ICS vendors add cryptographic signatures to their application updates. Perform periodic audits. That one is big. You need to train people and they need to audit. So here's your nice pile of vulnerabilities, but here's our solutions. Here are some examples of the different zones. Yeah, I know we're almost to the end here. Hang on, guys. Here are some different zones and how you can secure them based on, this one's the Purdue model. This is the zero trust model. Here are some, they have specific security organizations that are just for people that do this. There are OT security solutions. And lastly, we have some Tenable is a really good solution. So there we have it. We are on the last slide. Okay, so what did we do? IoT concepts, threats and attacks of IoT, IoT hacking, various countermeasures on IoT, secure IoT networks and devices. Then we went through OT threats and attacks, OT hacking methodology and OT hacking tools, various countermeasures on OT attacks, and OT security solutions and tools. Okay, so sorry that one's a long one, but I do suggest that you go back and look at those red slides that had more information on them. They will help you later. Let me stop share here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the lecture here and we will do our quiz, so don't run away.